We have Megan Manival from GitLab. Megan began her career as an IT auditor for an insurance company, actually, and she has managed or been engaged in internal audit, security auditing, security management, and risk management throughout her entire career. In her current role at GitLab, she manages a globally dispersed team of risk and field security engineers tasked with supporting GitLab's customer assurance activities, their security operational risk management, and third-party vendor risk management. She's an advocate for continuing education, and she told me that she's thrilled to be able to share her experiences with this group. So with that, I want to turn it over to Megan.
Thank you so much. I see a little bit of love there in the chat for GitLab, so thank you for those of you who might be GitLab customers. As I said, my name is Megan Manival. I'm the manager of risk and field security here at GitLab. Actually, if you want to go to my first slide, I have some jokes here for you. So when Reciprocity first reached out to me and asked me to speak here today, I was sure that there was someone more qualified than I am. But then I started thinking. I am a 2-time ZenGRC implementer, both here at GitLab and at my previous company. I hold the record, I'm told, for most snacks provided during an on-site implementation. You can check with some of the pies on that, but I'm pretty sure I still hold that record. And I am the second runner-up for most kids on our implementation team. We had a gentleman who has 6 kids. He wins. I'm not planning on trying to beat him anytime soon. So clearly, I'm qualified to be a guest speaker here today. And I really want to thank the folks here at Reciprocity for allowing me this time to talk to y'all. So next slide. As I said before, I'm a 2-time ZenGRC implementer, which is a pretty unique position. And what I mean by that is that I went through the process of selecting, vetting, contracting, and implementing ZenGRC at my prior company. And then once I moved to GitLab, I participated in the vetting and selecting process for ZenGRC Again. So what made me pick ZenGRC twice, right? That's a pretty nice accolade for Reciprocity to know. Well, looking back at my previous job, we recognized that need for a GRC tool for really 2 main use cases. We had our internal audit function, which my counterpart led, and we had our risk management function, which I led. And we began to search for tools that we could use in both use cases and fit within a budget. We needed to make our CFO happy with that. But as we were going through, what we realized, and I'm sure y'all probably have had the same experience, is some are really good for audit, some are really good for risk management, but few are really good at both. And then if you do find a tool, generally speaking, that's good at both or multiple things, you get this sort of pay per module method, and that would just blow our budget up. When we did look at ZenGRC, though, as part of our first demo, we were sold on the audit and risk features. I joked I had no poker face after the first demo. I was like, where do I sign? One of the biggest advantages that we saw was really that pre-built content. I know you talked a little bit about how you're changing that up with the seeded content. And I think that's a really great place to focus because that was a huge driver for us with that value. I remember, and some of you might as well, spending hours going through copying, pasting the language into spreadsheets, manually going through that. No more with ZenGRC. That built-in functionality as well to map across those multiple objects meant a lot more organizational options for us, quicker testing. But I'm sure I don't really have to go through all this. Otherwise, y'all wouldn't be here. You already know the value of ZenGRC, right? Well, after about 6 months of implementing at my prior job, and I think we can go to the next slide here, I left that company for my new role here at GitLab. And when I arrived, my surprise and joy that my new boss was already looking for a GRC tool. I was trying to stay out of it and let them, drive it. We were going down the path of an open source tool, but we started to see some of the downsides with that, which led us to ZenGRC. again, our primary use cases were very similar, the audit and the risk management. But for us, it was critical. I can't stress enough how critical our success hindered on a quick implementation and a quick return on investment. And that was really the driver, is that ZenGRC has an easy to use interface that allowed our global team to train on their own time, get into the portal on their own time, and really figure it out. On top of that, if we did have any issues, Reciprocity, much like GitLab, is extremely transparent with their documentation. So my team was used to that self-service, go out and look mentality, and Reciprocity fit right into that. We had a lot of things as well that I would consider sort of that white glove service that is fantastic, but without the extra price. And that really was the tipping point for us, was that support team there. Going on to the next slide here, I wanted to just, before I go into too much more about how my team uses it, which I know you are waiting with bated breath, I just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about my tips for a successful implementation. As I said, I've done it twice now. I'm not going to say it's a world record, but I want Reciprocity to check on this. We implemented in 11 business days, so just over 2 weeks. I feel like that might be a record we have to look into. So I'm really hoping that some of my tips and success y'all can use in the future, or we can pass on to additional customers in the future. So first and foremost, I can't stress this enough, know your current state. This was one area I wish I did more on the first time around. The existing processes at my prior company were pretty immature and not very detailed. And so we went into our implementation process with this, like, you tell me attitude. We don't know what we want. And it led to a lot of rework, a lot of import and then delete all that stuff and then re-import again. I really, really wish I had taken the time to document that as is state before undertaking any process improvements. On the flip side of that, as I kind of alluded to earlier, GitLab is all about transparent documentation. And so it was a lot easier for us to take that as is state and then improve into what we wanted to with Zen. The next is probably equally as important is to know your desired state. So once you know where you are, you have to know where you're going. And I know that that sounds silly, but I didn't plan that much the first time around. I wasn't sure. I was sort of in there messing around, and that deployment lasted almost 3 months because I couldn't get to a point where it was production ready. There were so many things I had to change around. The flip side of that, as I just told you, we did it at GitLab in 11 days. So really, really take that and intentionally plan out what that desired state looks like. And along with that, you really need to know what metrics you'll want to measure as that success. What's important to your organization? So for us, one of our KPIs relies on documenting my team's engagement with customer assurance activities. So there's not exactly a field in ZenGRC that says like, hey, how does this tie into our KPI? But by working backwards, we were able to utilize some custom attributes and able to address those. I'll show you those in a little bit when we look at our use cases. And that was really critical for us so that we could really easily create those dashboards, create those reports, and show that value. So my next one I think is a little controversial because I heard earlier that the Reciprocity folks maybe don't like import templates so much. I love import templates. I use them all day long. In fact, part of our automated workflow of initiating risks is an import template that flows from our Google Docs into ZenGRC. But also import templates are really, really great with historical data. So I know when you're thinking, hey, you're going to start this new system, that maybe you're not going to bring in necessarily data from the past. I would recommend bringing in at least a quarter's worth of data. We actually brought in, our entire risk register, our entire prior year's worth of identified information. Right now, about a quarter's worth of audit activity. We're bringing in all that historical data. And the reason why I think that that's important is because you can really easily start to show those trends and those dashboarding. If you had to wait until you have, audit 1 done, audit 2 done, audit 3 done, and then start to show that value, that really pushes out that ROI. So if you bring in that historical data, you're able to show trending, you're able to show maybe reduction in time, reduction in impact to your team, things like that. And then like I said, I love the import templates. So sorry, reciprocity there. But above all else, use your pie. This person really is there to help you, and they can bring in resources. They can bring in experts in the field to share those best practices. There's so many times where I'm in the portal and I was like beating my head up against the wall, and I said, why am I doing this? Quick email to my pie, and she's like, oh yeah, here you go. Here's the resource. Here's the link. Or if she didn't know it, it was, okay, here's a resource. Here's someone who can hop on a Zoom and help you with it. So really, really, really use your pie. And then once you're through implementation, you use the folks at Reciprocity. They really, really are there to help you. All right, so enough about implementation. Let's talk about our current use cases. So I want to start here. I know we're going to talk about risk specifically in a moment, but I really want to start here and talk about programs. As y'all know, programs are really the essential building block of ZenGRC. I stole this diagram here from your website, so hopefully no one minds here. But my advice is to be really intentional with your program design up front. And that goes along with what we were talking about with that pre-planning. But if you set that up early on and set up your program structure, it will set you up for more scalability in the future. So as I was talking before, our primary use case is audit and risk management, right? But there's a lot that rolls up into that. And so what we decided to do is use the program object, so the layer up there at the program layer within ZenGRC, to really organize what that looks like. And I really highly recommend to do that, especially if you have different teams or functional groups using the tool. It's a really great way to sort of compartment off your program, your interests there. Some of the programs, are based on the seeded content. So I just put some examples here, maybe an ISO 27001, your SOC 2, right? Like those are your traditional use cases for programs. And that's what our security compliance team uses. However, for my team, we're organized a little bit differently. We don't necessarily conduct our activities against a specific compliance program in the traditional sense. So what we did is we created these, the last three here on the list are my custom programs. So you heard earlier, my team kind of covers those three areas: customer assurance activities, risk management activities, and vendor. And so what that does is it really compartmentalizes my team's activities into those areas. And then in the future, you have the option of adding additional programs. So maybe you want to bring privacy, your legal team, your quality team into here to align their processes and utilize the mappings as well. And that's something you can do. This is a really scalable model that y'all can use to organize. So if we go to the next slide, you can see an example of what our customer assurance activities program looks like. So this program captures all of the controls and assessments that we conduct for a customer. So if you're a customer at GitLab, you come to us and maybe you need, you have a questionnaire, your own vendor due diligence, or you want to see our SOC report. Maybe it's a contract review, things like that. Those are all controls within this program. So anytime a new request comes in, it's a new audit created, and we utilize the controls that the customer asked for, and we conduct the assessment against those controls. We really, and we like that process. It's clear, it's clean cut. I can clearly see how many audits we've conducted. One of the other things too, with some of the advancements in the dashboarding, is I can actually see not just the number of audits we did, but how many of those included an assessment request for external evidence, right? How many of those were a follow-up meeting? And that way I know, hey, if we're spending a lot of time in meetings, maybe we need to adjust some of our processes. And so it's a really great tool when you break it down in this way to get that granular information and then roll it up to the larger program there. And then I also noted here that one thing that we also take advantage of is market. So we leverage the market object within ZenGRC to map that out. So I can see, do we have a lot of customers in the financial industry? Do we have a lot of healthcare requests? What's coming through and what are those trendings there? And then, like I said earlier, using custom attributes, we're able to look at things like customer size. Is it large, mid-market, SMB? Is it, what does that look like? Because that's a metric that's important to us. That might not be important to y'all, so you can just kind of, leave that out. And then going on to the next one here, and this is sort of what I was talking about, is once you begin to load your data, you get to see these nifty charts here. So this really is our, it's a snapshot of our historical data. And so that's where I was talking about bringing in that quarter's worth of data. You can start to see more clearly what's important to you. And in this case, it's where my team spends their time. So when I look at this chart, the upper right-hand one, what you can see is like, wow, we've conducted a lot of external evidence requests over this quarter, as opposed to, customer meetings. So maybe we need to adjust how that process looks, things like that. You can also see the lower one there. I know it's little, so it might be a little bit of an eye chart for you, but we look at things like their hosting option. That's something that's important to us that we want to track, or in this case, the customer size. And then market, like I mentioned, we use market. So I know those are little, but the top one is, financial services. Clearly, we do a lot with financial services. So maybe that's an area we want to focus on. So using that program and being able to track it in that way has been really, really beneficial for us. And it has a really clear output. And this is the reason I put this slide up here is because technically we've only been live in ZenGRC for a couple of weeks, but I have metrics I need to report. And so I was very happy to see some really great charts that pulled out of that historical data. My VP is going to be happy with this, and we're able to show that value sooner. So. Cool. So moving on from programs, going into risk management. First, we talked about the program level. So just like the customer assurance activities, we created a program for risk management. We did it a little bit different this time, though. We leveraged the sections object, so programs and then sections, to designate our risk tier. So here at GitLab, we have 3 different types of tiers, and my team is only responsible for what you see in the middle there, that security operational risks. So we have those 3 different sections because, again, it aids in reporting, it aids in that granular data. It all rolls up into one. So if you have a VP who wants to see all of that data, you have that. If you have maybe a manager or director who only wants to see a targeted one, you can really target and filter in this manner. And again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this really goes back to that pre-planning, knowing what your end state looks like and knowing what metrics are important to y'all. And then again, we did add some custom attributes here. I think some people get a little scared with custom attributes and think maybe they should be used sparingly. And again, I don't know if reciprocity is going to yell at me for this, but I think custom attributes are a really, really great opportunity to focus on what's important to you. So for us and our compliance requirements, there were a couple of things that were really important for us. You can see here we added a custom attribute for existing mitigations that might be there, your CIA impact, your threat source. Those were all things that we needed to collect as data points. And so it's super easy to just add them as custom attributes. And then as you can see here, we also map out to the org groups. So that's like internal to our team, that's your finance, your people team, where does that risk tie to? And then tasks, we use the task workflow to do our risk treatment planning. So when there's a task that the risk owner needs to complete, hey, we need you to document your latest milestone, or hey, we need you to document the root cause analysis, things like that. We can use the task workflow in an automated manner to do that. So moving on to the next slide for risk scoring. So again, I know I'm sounding like a broken record. I can't stress this enough. Plan out your scores. I did not do this the first time very well. And so I just went in and I created just generic factors. And then as I got down the road, I realized, I can't query on certain fields because they were leveraging the one set of factors. So this time around, what we did, and this is very actually clear in the documentation, was that we created in, inherent, we created, well, we have 3 different levels of risk, but we created 3 different sets of risk settings and risk factors. And that's really critical for your reporting as well. So I think we can all agree, we understand what inherent risk is. That's your risk without controls. But here at GitLab, we wanted to track residual risk in 2 different ways. So residual risk A, that's the risk with existing controls. Now, likely there's probably an issue with that existing control, otherwise it wouldn't be a risk, but we still like to have the opportunity to document what's in place. Because I think sometimes, people could get a little bit sensitive to, oh, there's a risk around my area. So we definitely want to keep that in mind as we're going through this. And then that drives our risk treatment plan. So whatever that residual risk A is, that drives, what we're going to do next. And then the final risk score is calculated after the new controls are put in place or the new updates are put in place. And then that has to be within our risk tolerance. I put the calculations here. I think we all kind of understand how that works. But the one thing that I will say is that if you look at residual risk A and B down at the bottom, there's impact A and likelihood A. And then impact final, likelihood final. You have to build out those factors all individually. So that was a lesson learned on my part for that. Sorry, just checking the time. I think we're still good. All right, next slide. What you'll see here is what I was just talking about. Sorry, previously I should have slipped the slides sooner, but as you can see now, we have 3 risk scores on that risk card view. And then if you jump to the next one, when you look at your heat map, you can actually filter by the type of risk. So like right now, I have it filtered as residual risk final. And then you can see in those columns over to the right, you can see what the inherent risk was and then how it dropped based on the risk treatment path. So I think that that's really valuable, and you mess around with it, see what's important, see what settings and factors work for you. But this was really telling for us to have those different risk factors broken down. All right, so I do want to take just a few minutes. I know we're getting close on time, but I do want to take just a few minutes. This slide is basically your VP is going to love. So I highly recommend taking the time to look at your efficiency gains and actually write them down on paper. Because when I started putting this together, I was like, I need to send this over, to my boss. Actually, she's watching right now. So, when you have these types of efficiency gains, it's great to have them and to track them and to put them down. And so you can see here, metrics gathering. That was a huge issue for us, as some of you might also have that, where you're going across multiple spreadsheets and your month-end reporting takes you, hours. My boss actually literally before this meeting asked me to pull some metrics where I was like, we don't have them on the old system, but here's everything since we put it into Zen. And I was like, here, can I give you this? And so it's really key to see those efficiencies as you're doing your reporting. Automated workflows, again, with the risk management, that was huge as well. And I know we didn't talk about vendor too much here, but using the weighted questionnaires, automatically scoring your vendors and identifying that risk, like that is a huge, huge time saver. I had 2 hours per vendor. The amount of vendors that my team churns, that's probably, it's a massive amount of hours for my team each month. So if you don't have a slide like this, if you don't have a report like this, I highly encourage you to do something like that and send it up to your bosses. So. Cool. So I know that was a lot of information at once, but I really hope that this helped some of you all in seeing some of the ZenGRC possibilities. Hopefully y'all go back and maybe add some efficiencies into your processes. I want to thank my team here at GitLab for all the support and work throughout this. Certainly I was not the only one who implemented in 11 days. It really was a team effort. And thank you to the reciprocity team for having me here today.